Well, the Greens may be critical to Tony Abbott's plans to get rid of the carbon tax if they end up holding vital numbers in the Senate. Since the 2010 election, the Greens' primary vote has been down in the polls, and given an enormous number of minor parties running in the Senate, the Greens face a tough battle to hold their line. To discuss the party's electoral prospects and other issues, I was joined a short time ago by the Greens leader, Milne. Senator Milne, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Lee.
Let's start with your realistic assessment of where you expect the Greens' status in the Parliament to lie after Saturday.
Well, I think we can hold all our seats, Lee. It's certainly going to be knife edge in South Australia and Western Australia in terms of the Senate. We could have unexpected outcomes around the rest of the country because of the plethora of minor parties. I'm confident that we'll hold Adam Bandt in Melbourne. It's been a fantastic campaign down there. So I think the Greens will hold our seats. We've got a good chance of picking up another one in Victoria in the Senate. But let's see, because the polls are suggesting the minor parties could have anything could happen for the last seat in several states.
Well, you mentioned the minor parties. On preference deals, have the Greens exposed their political opportunism by doing deals with Clive Palmer's Palmer United Party?
Well, as you know, you have to lodge a ticket by law, and I always say to people, vote for the Greens and then vote for whoever you like. But in terms of Clive Palmer, certainly he is a mining magnate, and I don't support his coal mines in Queensland, nor do I support the expansion of coal in the Bowen Basin or the Galilee Basin.
But you're happy to swap preferences with him to protect your political hide?
Well, the issue here is that he is exactly the same as Kevin Rudd and Tony Abbott. They all support the same thing. The difference with Clive Palmer is he takes a much more compassionate view about asylum seekers. And so when you look at the issues around coal, you've got all the same, or you've got a more compassionate position on asylum seekers.
If we can talk about economic policy, the Greens would like to shut down the coal, CSG and live export industries. What is your modelling on by how much that would slash government revenue?
Well, let's step back a moment. Certainly on live exports, the Greens have said we want to end live exports. We want to see those animals slaughtered in Australia and the meat exported. That would actually create more jobs, and it would, of course, protect the animal welfare standards. And there's one of those abattoirs proposed in Darwin.
Farmers would disagree that would save jobs, but go on.
Well, we've worked with the unions in this regard, and where there has been a slowdown in terms of live exports, you've seen a pickup in those countries importing frozen meat. So that is one issue. On the other two, we've said we don't want to see an expansion of coal mines, and certainly oppose the Bowen and the Galilee basins. In terms of the costs, you have to look at what is the cost of accelerated global warming and what is the cost to the tourism industry and the Great Barrier Reef.
Have you done some modelling on what the cost to the budget bottom line would be of your plans to wind those things back?
Well, nobody knows what the projected impact of the Bowen or Galilee basins will be. No one has looked at the extent of Commonwealth subsidies in terms of driving those industries, but what I am sure of is that there will be a mega cost over time to the Great Barrier Reef. In fact, it could see the Great Barrier Reef listed as World Heritage in danger, which will not only threaten the reef, but the 63,000 jobs that depend on it, and the $6 billion a year that the reef brings to Australia in tourism dollars.
The mining sector employs tens of thousands of workers directly and hundreds of thousands of workers indirectly. What will you do for all of those people who would be out of jobs as a result of Greens' policies?
Well, have a look at the mining industry. They are pretty ruthless themselves in shedding jobs as soon as there is a downturn in commodity prices.
We're talking about your policies.
And I'm saying that we would put a levy, for example, on coal exports to put into building resilience in the face of climate change and actually putting that into infrastructure and preparedness. There is no question of the mining industry closing down in Australia. What we are seeing is the mining industry taking advantage of mega subsidies like fossil fuel fuel subsidies, for example. It's being driven at a time when the World Economic Forum says that we should be decoupling economic growth from resource extraction and environmental impact. In fact, the Greens are right on the money in terms of where the direction of the economy should be. Invest in education, stop university cuts, invest in new technology, don't keep going on a back to the future path.
On another policy area, asylum seeker policy, how many refugees do you anticipate would travel to Australia via boat under your policy?
Well, what we want to do is give people a safe pathway so that they don't have to risk their lives on boats, and that has always been our policy position. We've said we want to increase the humanitarian intake to 30,000 a year out of a possible 190 at the moment in terms of migrant intake, plus put an extra 70 million into supporting the UNHCR in Indonesia so that it can assess people more quickly. Now, what that will do...
I just want to pick up on the 30,000 figure. 30,000 is an absolute pittance compared to the number of people around the world who need assistance. You look at the numbers of people coming out of Syria right now, 1.7 million already. Offering 30,000 places isn't going to meet all of the demand. You're still going to have people who try to make the journey via boat.
Well, let's see. Nobody has actually gone and done it to actually clear out the backlog in Indonesia and to start talking to the region and to other countries about how many more people they would take. What we do know is that deterrence doesn't work, and the last 12 months has shown that. The old parties both got together and said deterrence will work and cruelty is the way to go. An overwhelming majority of Australians are really, really uncomfortable with this policy position, and I can tell you throughout the campaign, people have come up to me and said, not with my vote, not in my name. They actually want Australia to be decent to people and to uphold international law. And I think that's going to be even more important as we take our position on the Security Council and in the G20.
Just quickly, I want to check if Tony Abbott is elected on the weekend and he attempts to repeal the carbon tax, do the Greens stand by their position that you will block that in the Senate if possible?
Yes, it's absolutely important that we take strong action on climate change. We're in a climate emergency. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change will make its science report available in about 3 weeks' time. It's critical as we go into negotiating the global treaty in 2015 that Australia lifts its efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, not abandons what the International Energy Agency has said is template legislation, and I'm going to stick with that legislation, and I will not support an Abbott government trying to repeal it.
Christine Milne, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Lee.